Hello everyone, and welcome to my General Hospital official channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The General Hospital spoilers for Friday, May 2nd show that Nina Reeves may send an SOS to Portia Robinson, while Danny Morgan and Rocco Falconeri have a wild night. Willow Corinthos will also be awaiting confirmation, so expect some twists and turns. To begin, let's talk about Maxie Jones, as she has a full day ahead. In addition to dealing with a sudden ultimatum, Maxie will become suspicious of Lois Cerullo. Maxie will be perplexed as to why Lois seems so concerned after she makes some bizarre remarks regarding Brooklyn Quartermaine and practically forces Maxie to stand up for her. Meanwhile, Tracy Quartermaine will process Brooklyn's most recent confession. Brooklyn admitted to having a baby as a teenager and giving him up for adoption, so Tracy will question her about the incident. When Tracy asks if Brooklyn regrets her decision, she may admit it was the best option for her son. At the same time, Brooklyn should wish she knew for certain that her now-grown child was fine. Tracy appears to be about to confront Lois about the secret, thus Lois may be concerned that Brooklyn may reveal too much to her crazy grandmother. Dante Falconeri and Lulu Spencer will have an emotionally charged conversation. Lulu will act as if Dante is prioritizing Brooklyn's feelings, but Dante will reaffirm Lulu of her importance to him. We know Lulu will proclaim her love for Dante in the near future, so Friday's episode could be when she does so. Jocelyn, Jax, and Vaughn will work together at the campfire to take Emma's thumb drive. If Emma and Giovanni Gio Palmieri go swimming, Emma's shorts may be left unattended, making them vulnerable to theft. The goal is to grab the thumb drive, copy the data, and return it corrupted without Emma discovering, thus there will be a lot to do in a short period of time. Jocelyn and Vaughn will have to work as a cohesive one here. Danny will encourage Rocco to drink with him as they try to blend in with the college crowd. That could lead to some drunken mayhem later in the night. Because Max Scorpio will receive updates on criminal activity, he may end up on the beach if there are allegations of underage drinking or other chaos. Will Mac break up the party and make arrests? Nina will most likely send Portia an SOS now that Willow has taken Drew Kane to GH for a blood test. Nina may pressure Portia to act and anticipate the impending calamity if she does not. Will Portia force Brad Cooper to repeat her dirty job and change Drew's test results? Willow will wait for confirmation on Drew's claim that there is more to the story. If Drew's test results show he used ketamine, it will obviously raise some red flags. However, it is feasible that Brad will manipulate the test results to make it appear as if Drew simply spiraled out of control after drinking too much. Drew and Willow will receive some critical news from Isaiah Gannon when he delivers the blood test results. Carly Spencer will pay Nina a visit and accuse her of planning Drew's newest infidelity show. It appears Nina will agree she did what was necessary, so we'll see what Carly has to say about the Jacinda mess. General Hospital spoilers predict Nina will face the consequences of her actions sooner or later, so stay tuned. Willow's lab shocker, Nina's SOS to Portia, Danny and Rocco's wild night. The anxiety in Willow's lab was evident as she peered at the results on the computer screen, her hands slightly quivering. The experiment she had been carrying out in secret had produced unexpected, and perhaps dangerous, effects. She'd worked late into the night, cross-referencing data and double-checking her calculations, but the truth was staring her in the face. If her discoveries were right, the consequences could be disastrous not just for her, but for everyone involved in her research. She hurriedly minimized the screen as the lab door creaked open, her heart racing in her chest. Was someone after her? Or was this just another late-night visit by the university's study team? Either way, she couldn't afford to be caught just now. She needed to figure out her next step before it was too late. Meanwhile, across town, Nina was pacing her apartment, clutching her phone tightly. She had already attempted to call Portia 3 times, but each time had gone directly to voicemail. The gravity of her predicament weighed heavily on her. She had discovered information she wasn't allowed to know, and she wasn't sure who to trust. Portia was the only one who might understand, the only one who could guide her through the mess she'd gotten herself into. With a furious groan, Nina texted a desperate text. "Portia, I need you. It's bad. Call me ASAP." She hit send, then dropped her phone onto the couch, raking her hands through her hair. What if Portia doesn't answer in time? What if those who were after her discovered her first? The notion sent shivers down her spine. She had to remain cool, but each second felt like a lifetime. In the same time, Danny and Rocco were having a good time in the city's wildest underground club, with the music's bass vibrating through their bones. They had begun the night with a few beers, but things quickly escalated. Rocco had a propensity for causing problems, and Danny was always along for the ride. The dimly lighted room was crowded with humans moving in time to the pulsating rhythm, yet Danny could sense the vibe shifting. Rocco had that glitter in his eye, which always indicated that they were ready to do something reckless. Sure enough, Rocco leaned in and shouted over the music, "You ready for the next level?" Before Danny could react, Rocco was leading him to a gloomy corner where a group of shady-looking characters were exchanging something beneath the table. Danny's instincts told him to leave, but the excitement of the night, the adrenaline pouring through him, made him hesitate. This might be the happiest night of their lives, or the worst decision they've ever made. Willow returned to the lab and made a decision. She couldn't keep this information much longer. She grabbed a flash drive, copied the most important files, and placed it into her pocket. She'd have a backup in case someone came looking. However, she needed to get out of there before being discovered. As she turned off her workstation, she heard footsteps approaching again, this time deliberate and purposeful. Her breath caught. Had they found out yet? She looked around for an exit, but the only way out was via the front door. Swallowing hard, she forced herself to remain cool as the door swung open. Nina's phone finally buzzed and she picked it up, relieved to see Portia's name on the screen. Nina scowled as she read the message. "Meet me at the old docks. Midnight. Don't tell anyone." What about the docks? What time is it now? It was hazardous, but she had no alternative. If Portia believed it was vital, it must be serious. She grabbed her jacket and keys, taking one last look around her flat before heading out into the night. She had no idea what awaited her, but she knew one thing. She couldn't do this alone. Danny and Rocco's night took an unexpected turn when the deal they had fallen into went wrong. They were handing over money for what Rocco had promised would be a fun night, and the next thing they knew, flashing lights and shouted demands filled the air. Danny's gut plummeted as he realized what had happened. "Cops!" Rocco snarled, racing for the nearest escape. Danny followed, his heart pounding as they moved through the frightened mob. They rushed out into an alley, the cold air hitting them like a slap. Rocco was laughing as if this was just another adventure, but Danny couldn't ignore the sensation that they had crossed a line tonight that they might never be able to recover from. Willow's encounter at the lab turned out to be nothing more than a janitor doing his rounds, but the shock was enough to strengthen her resolve. She could not stay here. She needed to locate someone who could assist her make sense of her discovery before it ended up in the wrong hands. But who could she entrust? As she snuck out of the building, she glanced at her phone, hesitant to contact a number she hadn't used in years. It was a long shot, but if anybody could assist her now, it was him. Nina arrived at the docks, the only sound being the ocean lapping against the piers in an otherwise peaceful night. She surveyed the area but found no trace of Portia. A knot of fear grew in her chest. Has she been set up? Just as she was about to go, a stranger appeared from the shadows. But that was not Portia. Nina's blood raced cold when she recognized the face staring back at her, one she had hoped to never see again. Danny and Rocco thought they'd fled, but their relief was fleeting. As they paused to catch their breath in a deserted parking lot, a dark car approached them. The window rolled down, revealing a man wearing a chilly smile. "You boys have something that belongs to me," he replied calmly but with a clear threat. Rocco, always the wild one, straightened his shoulders. "Yeah? And what's that?" The man's smile never reached his eyes. "Your lives if you don't hand over what you took." The night was far from finished, and Willow, Nina, Danny, and Rocco's fate would be determined by the decisions they made in the next hours. Secrets, betrayals, and hazardous alliances were playing out in real time, and there was no turning back. Willow was crouched over her messy lab desk, her fingers quivering as she adjusted the microscope's focus. The gloomy light from the above lamp formed strange shadows on the petri dishes and strewn notes. She had been working feverishly for weeks on her latest experiment, which was on the verge of becoming a breakthrough, or a disaster. Tonight looked to be the night she'd find out which one it was. As she gently added the final ingredient to the solution, A violent reaction emitted a spark. The glass beaker cracked, sending a column of smoke upward. Willow staggered back, coughing, her heart racing. This was not intended to happen. The formula was steady, or so she thought. Now, as she peered at the smoldering remains of her effort, a horrible revelation hit her. Somebody had messed with her study. But who? And why? Across town, Nina paced the length of her apartment, clutching her phone tightly. The call she had just received had left her startled, her customary calm shattered. She had always been the strong one, the one people relied on, but now she was in serious need of assistance. Her fingertips lingered over Portia's contact, hesitant. Nina didn't want to add to Portia's worries. But this was different. It was life or death. She took a deep breath and pressed the call button. The phone rang once, twice, and finally Portia answered, her voice warm yet exhausted. Nina? What is wrong? The floodgates opened. Nina's voice trembled as she unloaded everything, threats, blackmail, and the anxiety that had been plaguing her for days. I don't know what to do, she said, barely above a whisper. Portia responded immediately. I'm on my way. Meanwhile, Danny and Rocco were partying at the Vortex, the city's most infamous underground club. The bass hammered through their chests as they gulped shots, laughing at some secret joke only they knew. Rocco wrapped his arm around Danny's shoulder and shouted over the music. Tonight we forget everything, bro. No rules, no regrets. Danny smiled, the alcohol obscuring the edges of his thoughts. He needed this, a night to unwind, to forget the shambles his life had become. However, as the night progressed, their actions became increasingly crazy. A daring dare resulted in a brawl in the back alley, with fists flying and adrenaline pumping. When the cops came, Danny and Rocco were already fleeing down the shadowy streets, their laughter ringing behind them. They collapsed in an alley, exhausted and exhilarated. That was insane, Danny gasped, wiping blood from his broken lip. Rocco grinned. Best night ever. But when the adrenaline wore off, Danny's smile faded. What had begun as a joyful retreat was turning into something worse, and he was unsure whether he could stop it. Willow returned to the lab and sorted through the rubble, her mind racing. The sabotage was too exact to be accidental. Only a few people had access to her notes, her co-workers and assistants. Someone she entrusted had deceived her. But who stood to benefit from her failure? Her research was innovative, with the potential to treat a rare condition. Pharmaceutical companies offered her millions for the rights, but she declined, wanting to keep her work independent. Had she created a dangerous enemy? Her hands shook as she brought out her laptop and accessed security footage from the lab. She skipped through the hours, her eyes searching for something unexpected. Then she noticed it. A dark person slipping in after hours, fiddling with her devices. Although the face was concealed, the build and movement were recognized. Too familiar. Her blood became chilly. Nina's apartment door sprung open and Portia raced in, her face etched with concern. Without saying anything, she drew Nina into a close hug. Why didn't you tell me earlier? She demanded, her voice full of emotion. Nina clung to her, the weight of her terror eventually crushing her. I didn't want to drag you into this, she confessed. Portia drew back, grasping Nina's shoulders. That's what friends are for, idiot. She listened as Nina described the incident, the anonymous texts, the images left on her doorstep, and the ominous threat to back off or else. Portia's expression hardened. This is not simply a threat. Nina nodded. This is personal. But who would do this? Portia's jaw stiffened. We will figure it out. Together. Danny and Rocco's night took another turn when they strolled into an all-night diner, still buzzing from their previous adventures. The waitress looked at their untidy appearances carefully before sliding 2 coffees across the counter. Rocco grinned and slung an arm around her. Hello, darling. How about something stronger? She rolled her eyes and walked away. Danny chuckled, but his amusement vanished as his phone vibrated. A text message from an unknown number flashed across the screen. You're in over your head. His stomach fell. Rocco observed a shift in his expression. What's up? Danny paused before showing him the note. Rocco's smirk disappeared. Who the hell is this? Danny shook his head. I don't know, but someone's watching us. Willow's investigation led her to a startling realization. The saboteur was someone she had considered a friend. The evidence was undeniable. However, challenging them meant jeopardizing everything. Her profession, her safety, and perhaps her life. But she couldn't let it go. General Hospital spoilers indicate that Michael Corinthos may have shocking news for Jason Morgan. Will a phone call exacerbate Drew Kane's difficulties and leave Jason with a conundrum to solve? The anxiety in the air was apparent as Michael grasped his phone, his fingers lingering over Jason's number. He'd spent weeks piecing together the discrepancies, bizarre errors, and unexpected failures that had beset their most recent endeavor. Initially, he discounted them as coincidences, bad luck perhaps, or plain human error. But, as the evidence accumulated, one name kept coming up: Drew. The knowledge hit Michael like a freight train. Drew, their valued colleague, had been sabotaging them all along. The question now was whether Jason believed him. Michael took a deep breath and pressed the call button. The phone rang once or twice before Jason answered, calm but distracted. "Hey, Michael. What up?" Michael paused for just a second before leaping in. "Jason, we need chat." "It is about Drew." There was a pause on the other end, and Michael could practically hear Jason's mind working, absorbing the gravity of the situation. "How about Drew?" Jason's tone had transformed, from casual to guarded interest. I know he's been sabotaging the project," Michael stated quietly but firmly. He'd rehearsed this moment in his brain numerous times, but now that it was occurring, the words came out quickly. None of the delays, lost files, or miscommunications were inadvertent. Drew has been behind it all. Silence stretched between them, laden with disbelief. Jason breathed sharply. "That is a severe accusation, Michael. Have you got proof?" Michael had anticipated skepticism. Jason and Drew had been working together for years, and their professional connection had become almost like a friendship. Of course, Jason wouldn't believe him at face value. "I do," Michael responded. "I've been tracking the irregularities, and they all point back to him. The server records suggest that he accessed critical files just before they were corrupted. The emails that never got sent? He was the last person to handle them. And remember how the client abruptly modified their expectations last month? Drew spoke to them alone." Jason was quiet again, and Michael could see him going over the same events in his mind, connecting the dots. "Okay," Jason answered softly. "Let's pretend you're correct. Why would Drew do that? What does he stand to gain?" Michael had grappled with the question for days. Drew had always been ambitious, but sabotage seemed excessive. Michael stated, "I think he's working with someone else. Perhaps a competitor. Perhaps he's attempting to force us out so he can take over the project himself. Either way, he's been playing us since the beginning." Jason sighed and the line crackled with static. "This is a lot to process. If what you're saying is correct, we're in serious trouble." "I know," Michael replied, "but we cannot let him get away with it. We need to confront him strategically. If we warn him too soon, he'll hide his traces." Jason's voice hardened. "Agreed. However, before we take action, we must have indisputable evidence. If we accuse him without concrete evidence, it may backfire." Michael nodded, despite the fact that Jason could not see him. "I have already begun compiling everything, but we'll need to move quickly. The board meeting is in 3 days, and Drew has something planned." "Then we stop him before then," Jason said. "Meet me tomorrow morning. We'll go over everything and plan our future moves." Michael felt relieved. At least Jason was on his side. "Tomorrow then." As the call ended, Michael sank back in his chair, the weight of the talk settling on him. He had taken the first step, but the real war was only beginning. Drew was not the sort to give up without a fight, and if he understood they were after him, things could become ugly. Michael arrived at the workplace early the next morning, carrying a laptop full with documents, timestamps, and digital trails pointing to Drew's dishonesty. Jason had already arrived, his face stern as he scanned the information Michael had provided him the night before. "This is damning," Jason mumbled while scanning through the information. "I can't believe we didn't see it sooner." "He's been careful," Michael added. "But everyone slips up eventually." Jason leaned back and rubbed his temples. "So what is the plan? Can we take this to HR? What about the board?" Michael shakes his head. "Not yet. We have to catch him in the act. If we can get him to admit what he did on record, he won't be able to get out of it. Jason lifted his eyebrow. Do you want to set a trap? Exactly. Michael displayed a draft email on his screen. I have been thinking. The client expects a revised proposal by the end of the week. What if we revealed that we had identified a major fault in the project, which may derail everything? Drew will see it as an opportunity to strike. Jason's face lit up with a slow smile. You're saying we bait him into making a move. And when he does, we'll be ready. The strategy was hazardous, but it was their greatest chance to expose Drew's duplicity. Over the next 2 days they dropped subtle hints, whispered chats in the corridor, cryptic notes left on desks, all intended to entice Drew into action. Then, the night before the board meeting, their perseverance paid off. Drew was recorded on security cameras entering the building after hours, his actions evasive as he browsed project files. What he didn't realize was that Michael and Jason were monitoring remotely and recording every keystroke. When Drew changed the final presentation, introducing flaws that would have embarrassed them in front of the board, they had him. Drew came into the conference room the next morning with a smug look, expecting commotion, but instead finding cold quiet. Jason stood at the head of the table with his arms folded. Is something wrong? Drew inquired, his confidence shaking under the weight of their glances. Michael did not hesitate. We know what you did. Drew's face became pale, but he quickly recovered and forced a laugh. I have no idea what you're talking about. Jason tapped a button on his laptop, and footage from the night before appeared on the screen. Drew's own deeds condemned him. The fallout was fast. Drew was suspended pending an investigation, and the project was saved, but the treachery caused lasting scars. Trust once destroyed was difficult to rebuild. Jason sighed when Michael and he debriefed later. I still can't believe he'd do this. Michael nodded. Some people will do anything to get ahead. But they could now move forward, knowing they had halted the sabotage before it was too late. This enlarged version digs deeper into the unfolding drama, Michael and Jason's strategic maneuvering, and the eventual revelation of Drew's betrayal. Please let me know if you need any changes or more information. GH fans may recall that Jason suggested Willow Corinthos fly to Germany and speak with Michael in person. Jason hoped Michael and Willow could find common ground for the sake of the children. That's why Jason's suspicions will rise when he learns about Willow's aborted attempt to see Michael in Baden-Baden. Willow may eventually protest to Jason that his plan was a fiasco because Michael declined her meeting, or so she believes. Drew was the one who botched the visit by paying a clinic employee into claiming Michael had nothing to do with Willow. Jason is quite familiar with Michael, so when Willow describes what happened, he will not recognize him. Drew clearly didn't think this idea through, as Jason could simply phone Michael and ask him questions. Michael will quickly explain that he had no idea Willow was in the building. Michael may convince Jason that if he had known Willow was there to talk, especially concerning their children, he would have definitely spoken with her. Jason may assume the woman at the front desk was lying and begin to consider who would have wished to prevent this visit. Drew may rapidly become Jason's main suspect. Jason could easily fly back to Germany and grill the employee. Perhaps Jason could even offer her additional money, and promise to keep her out of trouble if she admits who bribed her. Will the clinic employee report Congressman Kane for what he did? Jason may finally have the necessary confirmation to reveal Drew's behavior to Willow. Michael might potentially phone Willow and say he had no idea she was there. Drew has more pressing concerns to deal with right now as a result of the scandal started by Nina Reeves and Portia Robinson, but he should not get away with what he did to prevent Willow from seeing Michael. Portia and Nina's strategy has made Drew a victim, but let's not forget that Drew has also committed some horrible deeds. Drew doesn't get a pass, so let's hope Jason and Michael's collaboration reveals at least one of his terrible secrets. The tension in the room was evident as Michael clutched his phone, his fingers hovering over Jason's number. He'd spent weeks piecing together the anomalies in the company's recent failures, delayed shipments, misplaced contracts, and the unexpected resignation of key staff. At first, he blamed bad luck or internal mismanagement, but the truth was much darker. Drew, whom he had previously considered a valued co-worker, had been actively destroying the company. And now Michael had the evidence. He took a deep breath and pressed the call button. The phone rang twice before Jason's keen, attentive voice came through. Michael? It is late. What's happening? We have a problem, Michael explained, his voice low but anxious. A large one. This is Drew. There was a brief pause on the other end, and Michael could practically hear Jason's thoughts racing. Drew had been with the company for years, a smooth operator who had always appeared a bit too eager to please, offering ideas that never quite worked out. What about sabotage? That was another level totally. What did he do? Jason's demeanor had turned from curiosity to steely intent. Michael sighed and reorganized his thoughts. Remember the Henderson deal that fell through last month? Which one cost us nearly $500,000. It wasn't just a lousy negotiation. Drew purposefully changed the terms before sending the final draft to the client. I discovered the original file in his deleted folders. He believed he had buried his tracks. Jason swore beneath his breath. What about the warehouse fire? Who damaged the new inventory? Not an accident, Michael confirmed. Security footage shows Drew entering the building 1 hour before the alarms went off. He turned off the sprinkler system. The weight of the revelation had settled between them. Drew hadn't merely made mistakes. He had intentionally attempted to damage the company. But why? Michael couldn't stop thinking about that question. Was it personal? Financial? Had he been paid to bring the enterprise down? Jason's subsequent words were measured. We have to move gently. If Drew discovers we're watching him, he may become agitated. Michael agreed. Confronting Drew directly could backfire. He was too savvy to admit without power. They needed definitive proof that would prevent him from manipulating his way out. I've been tracking his communications, Michael said. He has made contact with a competitor firm. Nothing outright, but enough to imply he is providing them information. Jason laughed without humor. So he's not just sabotaging us, he's setting us up for a takeover. The parts were falling into place. Drew had been playing a long game, eroding the corporation from within so that when the competition made their move, they would face minimal resistance. It was corporate warfare, and they had been unaware of the enemy in their midst. What are our next steps? Michael asked. Jason was silent for a time before saying, We set a trap. The strategy was easy in theory but risky to carry out. They would give Drew fake information, creating a created crisis to drive him to act. If he was actually working against them, he would carry it out and they would catch him in the act. Over the next 4 days, Michael and Jason carefully planned their deceit. A bogus emergency board meeting was planned, during which they would allegedly explore a last-ditch merger to preserve the company. The details were unclear enough to be realistic but compelling enough to persuade Drew to take action. Sure enough, within hours of the announcement, Drew was on the phone with an unknown number, his voice quiet yet eager. Michael, who had quietly bugged Drew's office, listened in real time as Drew passed phony information to his source. They're desperate, Drew said. If you move now, you can take control before they even see it coming. That was all the confirmation they required. The confrontation occurred the next morning. Jason convened an emergency meeting with the senior staff, including Drew, who entered with his normal calm demeanor, utterly ignorant that his treason had been exposed. We have a serious issue, Jason said, his voice firm. Someone in this room has been working against us. Drew's countenance did not change, but Michael noticed a little tightening of his jaw. Jason continued. At first I assumed it was terrible luck. Then I assumed it was ineptitude. What about now? He tapped a folder on the table. Now I know it was deliberate. Drew leaned back in his chair, faking confusion. What are you talking about? Michael passed a copy of the incriminating phone transcript across the table. Drew, we know it was you. We have proof. Drew let his mask drop for the first time. His gaze shifted to the door, then back to Jason and Michael, weighing his alternatives. You don't understand, he finally stated, his voice losing its smoothness. The corporation was already sinking. I was simply speeding up the inevitable. Jason's expression clouded. You don't get to make that call. The fallout was fast. Drew was fired on the spot, and his access was cancelled before he could cause any further damage. Legal action would ensue. Corporate sabotage, fraud, and potentially arson were not to be taken lightly. As Drew was led out of the building, Michael felt only bleak relief. They had stopped the bleeding, but the harm was already done. Rebuilding trust with customers and staff would take time. Jason placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. "We got him thanks to you. Good work." Michael nodded, but his thoughts were already going toward the future. If Drew was willing to go this far, who else might pose a threat? The phone call revealed the sabotage, but it also revealed something more fundamental: the fragility of trust in a society where ambition can turn allies into adversaries. And when Michael walked back to his office, he was certain that they would never be caught off guard again.